Folks, today is Thursday, June 4th, 2020. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered. The first of 3 funeral services for George Floyd took place today in Minneapolis. We will have all of what took place, including the call for changes to laws in this country by Ben Crump, the family attorney. Congressman Al Green is here to talk about the urgent need for police reform on the federal level. Also today, the hearings for the preliminary hearing for the man who killed Ahmaud Arbery started. One of them, shocking testimony, not shocking to us, where one of the men stood over his body and said, "Here's a nigger." We're going to play it for you. In Asheville, North Carolina, video shows police destroying a medical station for protesters. Also today in Richmond, Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam says he'll remove the Robert E. Lee statue as soon as possible. We'll be joined by Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, as well as a descendant of Robert E. Lee on the show. Plus, will we see a spike in coronavirus cases as a result of the protests nationwide? And will black people continue to be the most affected? We'll talk to a public health expert. And New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees has apologized for his flag comments, but he's pissed off a lot of brothers in the NFL, including his own team members. And 2 crazy-ass white people today, Florida and Texas, as always. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, folks, it has been an extremely busy day all across the country. 2 significant cases that we have been covering. The George Floyd Memorial Service, the first one took place in Minneapolis today, where Attorney Ben Crump, Reverend Al Sharpton both spoke. That service was carried all across the country by the broadcast networks, but the black networks, the target black people, didn't bother to actually air that memorial service. Now, while that was happening, in Atlanta, there was a hearing, a preliminary hearing taking place in the Ahmaud Arbery case. We're going to start with that one today. Folks, shocking testimony revealed. Happened today. Listen to this right here.
All right, I would have kept that.
Thank you, sir. The last thing that I think I need to talk to you about, well, the last couple things, this is going to involve an uncomfortable conversation, and you and I have talked about this a couple of times. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, we have.
You know that I want to ask you about a particular quote that Travis McMichael stated on the crime scene that was overheard by one of the defendants and shared with investigators prior to police arriving. Correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And though this may be an uncomfortable conversation for the benefit of the court and for the record, we're making it clear that this is not your quote, it's not the GBI's quote. This is a quote from a statement of Mr. Bryan as to what he heard Travis McMichael say prior to police arriving, correct?
Very much so, yes, sir.
Understanding that and understanding that it might be a little uncomfortable to talk about the words because it involves a curse word and something else, I need to ask you about that quote. Can you please articulate for the court what Mr. Bryan said he heard Travis McMichael say prior to police arriving and after the fatal shooting?
Yes, Mr. Bryan said that after the shooting took place, before police arrival, while Mr. Arbery was on the ground, that he heard Travis McMichael make the statement.
He stood over the body of Ahmaud Arbery and actually called him a nigger. My pound, Dr. Greg Carr. Chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies, Howard University, Erica Savage Wilson, host of Savage Politics Podcast, Reese Colbert, Black Women Views. Greg, I want to start with you. A lot of things we heard today that stood out the most. It's clear this was a hate crime. They also lied by saying that, oh, he was trying to carjack us. No evidence thus far. Lots of revealing testimony today out of Georgia.
Yeah, Roland, of course, and it's very much consistent with what we see when we start talking about anti-Black violence in this society. We're going to believe me or your lying eyes, or in this case, me or your lying ears. Of course he called him that. And the question is, why does William Bryan, why is he so animated in trying to get ahead of this? We don't know the relationship between the three men, including Bryan. We don't know if he's angling for a deal. But at the end of the day, while it certainly might be shocking in a general sense, I don't think that any of us who have been Black in America and paying attention were in any way surprised at this relation.
Erica, again, when you look at what took place today, when you heard that particular testimony as well, man, it was just unbelievable. And without a doubt, it exposes those DAs who pursued nothing, who didn't interview anybody. When you listen to that, this was about his race.
Absolutely, Roland, and that it was 3 DAs that were too limp to take action. And thinking about Mr. Bryan, I think that it is most appropriate, as he is being charged with felony murder, which carries with it in the state of Georgia a penalty of either life in prison without parole or the death penalty. So him scrambling to make up some type of excuse or make up some type of conversation that either was had or wasn't had is really of really doesn't matter as for me. What I'm thinking about is that his car was weaponized. He was a part of a crime that effectively lynched a 25-year-old man who they made up a story around with this property owner, Larry English, to say that they felt like he was doing something suspicious when video shows very plainly that Mr. Arbery wasn't the only person to go on that construction site and just look around in that house, that there were plenty of white people and white children that had actually been on that property throughout the day to just see what was going on. And so where my heart is, you're saying it's unbelievable and true that, but definitely not for Black lives and Black bodies. And that my heart goes out for his mother who had to leave the courtroom because of all that she'd heard. So this is really par for the course. And what I think America is largely seeing is really just how dangerous whiteness is.
It's an all-day hearing that lays out the preliminary facts. And it's just, again, listening to this is not the full case. But listening to this, how in the world could any DA come to the conclusion, no need to make charges? These white DAs were trying to protect these white men for killing, chasing down, and lynching a Black man.
That's precisely what it was. It's literally a modern day lynching, an extrajudicial killing that happened with these 3 white men chasing down, hunting, assaulting, because William Bryan actually hit Ahmaud Arbery with his car and then tried to claim he was carjacking him. No, he was running for his life. And these other, the McMichaels shot him multiple times, stood over his body and called him the N-word. That is a lynching. It's a 2020 lynching. And part of a lynching is that there is no justice in this country of America, and it has never been that way. And even today on the Senate floor, Rand Paul is arguing against an anti-lynching bill that had previously passed multiple times unanimously in the Senate and has passed multiple times in the House. And you have to have Senator Kamala Harris explain to Rand Paul that even if somebody's guts are not ripped out, even if the casket is not a closed casket or an open casket in the case of Emmett Till's mother's bravery, it's a lynching. And she invoked Ahmaud Arbery today, and it's just absolutely sickening to see the amount of evidence that this is clearly a lynching, a targeted execution of a Black man who was doing absolutely nothing to these people. And they got away with it. That is a tenet of white supremacy, a white supremacist government, and the system working as designed, which is to protect white men and their ability to hunt down and kill Black people without any kind of consequences.
It's important for us, again, so much of the attention is on the George Floyd case. When people have to understand, anytime you have video involved, that is what is going to get the lion's share of the attention. And so that's what you're experiencing here. But the fact of the matter is this here. This case here is also tied to police. And so even though these two individuals were not police officers, one used to work with law enforcement, this shows you the cover-up that exists and also this relationship that exists between law enforcement, such as district attorneys, such as cops there in that particular county, and of course these two men here. And so we can't overlook that case as well. Same thing when you talk about what took place in Breonna Taylor. That case also is being reopened now for the investigation. Has anybody heard from the Black Kentucky Attorney General on this case? I'm just curious.
I haven't.
Gotcha.
No.
But, you know, look, come on. You're Black conservative, but you're the Attorney General. Can you say something? Of course, same thing there. Cops not turning their body cameras on. Here we are 2 months later, going into the third month, those officers not at all charged. We had the Louisville City Council president on who said that the warrant was issued on January 21st and the supervisors did not update the warrant 2 months later. Had the supervisors simply updated the warrant, there would have been no need for a no-knock warrant on the home of Breonna Taylor.
Well, Roland, I think this is important. What you observe, what you're pointing out is very important to understand. Two things. Number one, every white person in the country is deputy police. When we look at whiteness in its policing dimension, the police are the official people who wield violence. But a white person dealing with a Black person can become deputy police in this sense. So there's expanded field of violence, certainly in the South, where the slave patrols were the origin of policing. So, of course, there's going to be an organic relationship. That's number one. Number two, especially when they were ex-law enforcement, as the case with the father. But number two, this is very important. I think we have to be careful now because it seems that there's a normative framework emerging for being able to charge police when it comes to Black death. Do you have a video? Do you have an audio? If you don't, then you just take the police's word. And if you do, we're still going to try to undermine the credibility of even that type of evidence. But the most important thing finally to understand is that as these frameworks of violence operate, when we start talking about law enforcement, remember Kenneth Walker, the charges would drop, but would reserve to represent them. So he isn't out of the woods yet. Remember that all of this, and you've been making this point, all of this street work, all of this general strike against the social order is what has caused the pressure that has led to the indictments in Minnesota and will ultimately lead to the indictments of, in the case of Breonna Taylor. I'm certain of that. I was down there today at 16th and H, and the young people there read a list of names that stretched over 20 minutes, and we were all on our knee. And Breonna's name, and when Breonna Taylor's name was raised, the name echoed across and bounced off the White House. My point is this: that's what's going to get those police officers charged, because the field of violence in which they operate is set up to exonerate them.
And can I just interject here too? Because in Tatiana Jefferson's case, there was, footage. So that made the difference between a Tatiana Jefferson versus Breonna Taylor getting justice. And so to your point, Greg, it's really, or Dr. Carr, it's really almost as if it's not caught on camera and broadcast for everybody to be traumatized by this footage, then it gets swept under the rug.
And absolutely, and to Bree and to Dr. Carr's point, this is important for especially white America to see that really the burden of proof is almost on Black people. So not only are we fighting systemic racism on every front, but to believe that because something has happened to us, be it something that was fatal or something that was non-fatal, that the burden of proof is on the Black body. And that is the bullshit that has to stop.
Folks, today, of course, all the attention was focused on Minneapolis, a university there where they had the memorial service for George Floyd. It is the first of three. One took place today. There will be another one in North Carolina on Saturday, and then the final resting place will be at Fountain of Praise Church in Houston, Texas. Here is what took place today.
Praise God. Praise God. In the midst of our pain, praise God, we're going to still praise you.
It was not the coronavirus pandemic that killed George Floyd. I want to make it clear on the record. Will Packard, it was that other pandemic that we're far too familiar with in America, that pandemic of racism and discrimination that killed George Floyd. We learned one thing: the Floyd boys like to eat. And also, they had a conversation with Tyler Perry, and it was pretty profound because they said, we are the big extended black family that you portray, Will Packard and others, on your movie screens, because we all need one another. And you can tell this family always needed George. And so it's awfully difficult for them. The plea for justice is simply this. Dr. Martin Luther King said, he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really like cooperating with it. You know, T.I., on that video, what we saw was torture. Reverend Jackson, what we saw in that video was inhumane. Martin III, what we saw in that video was evil.
Henry, am I killed?
And so, America, we proclaim, as we memorialize George Floyd, do not cooperate with evil. Protest against evil. Join the young people in the streets protesting against the evil, the inhumane, the torture that they witnessed on that video. We cannot cooperate with evil. We cannot cooperate with injustice. We cannot cooperate with torture. Because George Floyd deserved better than that. We all deserve better than that. His family deserve better than that. His children deserve better than that. Steve, all George wanted from life is what any of us want. As Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence, the unalienable rights endowed by our Creator, Tyrese, to life, liberty, and the pursuit to be happy on this earth. That's all George was asking for, like any and all of us. But he was denied those rights. And we will seek justice in his name. We will all, united as a people who are God's children, seek justice in his name. But beyond the specific justice, in his case, Chris, the prosecution of the 4 individuals who deprived George of his life, we seek a broader, more transformative justice. Reverend Al, a more just system of policing. Kevin, a more just treatment of people of color. Chris, a more just criminal justice system. In essence, what we are endeavoring to do, Brandon, is what my personal hero, Thurgood Marshall, said. Make the Constitution real for all Americans. You see, Justice Marshall said the basis of the Constitution is simply this, that a black baby born to a black mother, the most uneducated black mother, the most inarticulate black mother, the most impoverished black mother, has the same exact rights as a white baby born to a white mother, the most educated white mother, the most articulate white mother, has the most affluent white mother, just by virtue of that baby drawing its first breath as an American. Now, Justice Marshall said, Reverend Jackson, I know that's not the case in America today, but I challenge anybody to say, Tony, that's not the goal we're fighting for. He said, I challenge anybody to say, that's not what makes America the great beacon of hope and justice for all the world to marvel. So when we fight for the George Floyds of the world, but more importantly, when we fight for the unknown George Floyds of the world, when we fight for the Trayvon Martins of the world, when we fight for the Terrence Crutches of the world, when we fight for the Michael Browns of the world, when we fight for the Alton Sterlings of the world, when we fight for the Philando Castiles of the world, when we fight for the Jamar Clarks of the world, when we fight for the Eric Gardners of the world, when we fight for the Sandra Blands of the world, when we fight for the Ahmaud Arbery's of the world, when we fight for the Breonna Taylors of the world, when we fight for the Natasha McKinney's of the world, when we fight for the Stephon Clarks of the world, when we fight for the least of these, what we are really doing is helping America live up to its creed. What we're really doing is helping America be the great beacon of hope and justice for all the world to marvel. But most importantly, brothers and sisters, what we are doing is helping America be America for all Americans. What we want, T.I., is not two justice systems in America, one for black America and one for white America. What we endeavor to achieve is equal justice for the United States of America, and George Floyd is the moment that gives us the best opportunity I have seen in a long time of reaching that high idea that this country was founded on. Thank you so much. This is the plea for justice. On behalf of the family, the children, we will get justice. We are committed to it.
I want us to not sit here and act like we had a funeral on the schedule. George Floyd should not be among the deceased. He did not die of common health conditions. He died of a common American criminal justice malfunction. George Floyd's story has been the story of black folks, because ever since 401 years ago, the reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed to be in is you kept your knee on our neck. We were smarter than the underfunded schools you put us in, but you had your knee on our neck. We could run corporations and not hustle in the street, but you had your knee on our neck. We had creative skills. We could do whatever anybody else could do, but we couldn't get your knee off our neck. What happened to Floyd happens every day in this country, in education, in health services, and in every area of American life. It's time for us to stand up in George's name and say, get your knee off our necks.
All right, folks. That was, again, the first of three. The most important thing I think we heard today is what Ben Crump said, Erica, and that is, this is not about another death, another settlement for the family, another moment where we are, sad for them, and the city writes a check, and then maybe whatever happens to the cop move on. No. I keep arguing why this is different. It's because there has to be systematic change that now happens. I said this on ABC News last night, on local, on city, county, state, and the national level to deal with police reform, period.
Absolutely, Roland. And now people are looking more intently at who their mayors are, because mayors have oversight over the police department. For those who who thought that this was going to be a moment where it was kind of the same thing that they were accustomed to seeing, that this would be something that would just kind of die down after a couple of days, hell no. People are looking at budgets. People are looking at those folks that are in leadership, because the bottom line is that folks that are elected to office at every level, those levels you called out, the local and the state level especially, and then moving on to the federal level, but especially intimately involved in our daily lives, those people have a responsibility to the people that elected them into office. And so when those lines are finally now, I believe, largely being connected, people are looking at their mayors and have questions for their mayors. People are looking at their city and county commissioners, and they have questions for those folks, and rightfully so. So this is, again, not just a 1 or 2 or 3 day event. This is a moment. And those people who have not been accountable to the public, those people who have abused their power, those people who are solicitor generals, attorneys generals, those folks that are district attorneys, that have not done their due diligence, they have an accounting, and that reckoning is happening today.
Brett Carr, again, gathering, mourning, protesting is one thing, but mobilizing and organizing people to do the hard work of going to every city council, every county government, state legislature, and the federal government to put into place changes, laws, that is what has to follow. You take the momentum and the power of what's happening on the streets, and it must be translated into actual change.
I'm going to be very delicate about this, Roland, because today's ritual was powerful, it was moving, and I'm sure the ones in North Carolina and Houston will be as well. So this isn't about that, what I'm about to say next. I'll caution my students for 20 years not to lump Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson together, because they're both charismatic, they're both incredible speakers, and they both have a commitment to our people. Jesse Jackson emerged out of a leadership structure where there was a tension between SCLC and the kind of minister-driven leadership, and that of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the kind of consensus-driven collective movement. Jackson kind of straddled the fence a bit, but when we see the Rainbow Coalition fueled by the political logic of Ron Walters and others, the idea of black politics was to marshal from the ground up local leadership to do exactly what Erica just said. And the Jackson campaigns of '84 and '88 brought many of those local organizers into a structure that allowed them to move into elected officials positions and allowed them to bring people in. People say, does Jesse want to run for president? Why? Does he want to be president? Yeah, y'all want to be president, but if you come vote for me, you're going to vote down ballot. And it was that phenomenon that really built that black political power. And I'm going to contrast that with Al Sharpton a little bit. Al Sharpton is no less committed to black people, but Al Sharpton's model is different. And what we saw today with Sharpton, Ben Crump, and others, let me start with Crump. Crump exhibits a rather underdeveloped understanding of the American state. Those young people in the streets, that multiracial coalition that's out there moving now, have no connection to the kind of Ben Crump narrative. You know, America as the beacon of the world. That's a tired, failed paradigm at this point. And Ben Crump, as adroit as he is at representing the families of victims of police murder, reinscribing the idea by contrasting the black illiterate with the white well-educated. It's a failed paradigm. And so when Al Sharpton gets up and calls for a march on Washington in August, when there's a poor people's campaign already that had to go online for June 20th, and all these young people in the street, again, not connected, we're looking at a moment when we might not knit together that momentum. Finally, this. We're in the middle of a pandemic, brother. As moving as that ritual was, I was horrified to see sitting shoulder to shoulder, many with no masks, the choir with no masks, many people sitting out there with no masks, the celebrities like Kevin Hart with no mask. We can't breathe. And it isn't always because of a cop's knee on your neck. It's a pandemic. We've got to get out of the business of using these rituals to launch these individual-centered aspirational moments, because these young people are in the street and ain't gonna listen to any of us who are going to try to channel this back into the failed paradigm of race leadership as opposed to collective leadership.
Reese.
Yeah, that's Dr. Carr, you know, always.
I'm sorry I had you come behind Dr. Carr on that one, Reese.
No, man, I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of it,
so
brother.
Unfair. But you know, I can't follow that. But what I will say is, I agree with in terms of the. I don't want to use the word race leader. No shade to you, Dr. Carr. Respect everything you have to say, but we don't have necessarily that charismatic figure to lead us through this next chapter in a way that's uniting. So there is still going to have to be that collective coming together in people's own individual ways or different organizational different ways. And I think that we are starting to see that emerge with specific actionable things. You know, you do have the defund the police movement, which does have specific actionable things that they're calling for, like, you know, eliminating paid administrative leave for cops who kill people, or, you know, pensions and things of that nature. And then you have the 8 Can't Wait, you know, Campaign Zero movement, which has very specific actionable things as well that, you know, according to their information, shows that 72% of police violence will be decreased if they put these 8 measures in place immediately. And so I don't think that there is anybody with the capacity to harness all these individual collectives into a movement that will have one vision and one set of principles that they're going to try to put in place. But I do think that at least we do see very specific measures being put in place, and we do see a lot of support starting to galvanize behind that. And I just want to caution people to not denigrate the other movements. Whether if you're a defund police, that doesn't mean you have to be anti-8 Can't Wait. If you're 8 Can't Wait, doesn't mean that you have to be anti-defund police. It's not a competition. We need an all hands on deck approach. And so that's kind of where I'm going with it in terms of how do we actually get something out of it. It's not that we don't have a silver bullet, but there are specific things that can be done to reduce the specific issue of police violence and institutionalized racism in the criminal justice system. We still have a long way to go before we deal with the white supremacy in our society and the people self-deputizing themselves as slave patrols and things of that nature. But we can make some progress on the issue of police reform.
All right, some of y'all are commenting on social media. Y'all heard audio there where somebody was like, "Get the F out of here," while Reese was talking, and that was an open file looking at pulling up some video, and so that's what you heard. So y'all calm down. It wasn't directed at Reese. It was an open file. I'm trying to pull some video up on the iPad. But let me.
I wouldn't take it personal. Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
First of all, we know you and the F word have a very close relationship. So you ain't got no problem with that word at all. So let me. But before I go to Congressman Al Green real quick, this is what I'm looking at, and I think really what Greg was talking about. And that is, this is not, first of all, there are multiple ways. And the piece that people misunderstand is that you get the big six civil rights leaders during the 1950s and 60s. But the reality is you had numerous people who were on the local ground. Ella Baker, arguably one of the greatest organizers in American history, always said she believed that it was pew to pulpit and not pulpit to pew. In Barbara Ransby's book, she talked about where she and Dr. King disagreed was that King believed it was pulpit to pew. Pulpit leads pew. But she said, no, pew leads pulpit. The issue, and so for Ella Baker, when she went into places, she connected first with local leaders on the ground to say, okay, who is already doing the work in Birmingham, in Montgomery, in Selma, in Baltimore, in these different places, and how can we assist you? So that was her framework, which I absolutely believe the way it is. But I believe the point that Doc is talking about is also where I stand, and that is this is very simple. There are massive protests happening around the country, which I absolutely fundamentally support. I believe you have to have a show of force. People care. What then happens is what happens the next day. Data collection. Who's here? Names, phone numbers, emails. Because when it's time to go before the city council, when it's time to go before the school board, when it's time to put the pressure on the state legislature, when it's time to put the pressure on the county government, when it's time to deal with who governs the sheriffs and the constables and the school resource officers and the city police officers, and then also on the state level, then you've got to be able to move people like pieces on a chessboard. And that you have to do that without the benefit of a mass march. Because what people keep forgetting is that the civil rights leaders presented John F. Kennedy with a massive civil rights bill in 1961. He gets assassinated November 22nd, 1963. President Lyndon Baines Johnson agrees with the entire civil rights bill, but he then says, I can't pass it all at one time. So, Civil Rights 64, Public Accommodation, Voting Rights Act in 65, 68 Fair Housing Act. That was a 5-year process. But he understood how you have to get it done. And that was just the federal level. We ain't even talking about state, county, city. So, Greg, really where we are is that those who have infrastructure must now go, okay, what's our plan of action? And to all of y'all who are in Portland, and Seattle, and Minneapolis, and New York City, and Houston, and Huntsville, and Birmingham, all these different places, how are now we going to begin to organize and mobilize all these pieces? So, and I get the connection with the March on Washington anniversary, but Congress is not in session on August 28th. So now it's, okay, how can we now move people to, your point, Reese, Campaign Zero, Bail Project, this, because you got to send people to organizations to now do the work, Greg.
Brother, Roland, I appreciate that. And Reese, I'm with you. I mean, we have to have coalition politics. The idea of charismatic leadership has never worked. As Brother Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture used to say, If you put Martin Luther King in Montgomery by himself, he will be killed. It was the women washing clothes in them white women's houses that kept staying off the bus that did that. It was E.D. Nixon and the old Brotherhood Sleeping Car Porters Coalition. It was, of course, the Selma voter, the Dallas County Voter Rights League. We started talking about the formation there. So again, Al Sharpton is an important figure. And I'm certainly not here to beat up Al Sharpton because I'm old enough to remember. And I watched those kids out there in the street today name Eleanor Bumpers, name Michael Stewart, name those victims of New York Police Department when Al Sharpton himself was on the outside looking in. But when you get absorbed into a structure that requires you to come in but tries to keep everybody else that you represent out, you end up in a position where you become a representative type. There is no need for a March on Washington in August that does not incorporate, to the point that you're raising, all the momentum of what's going on right now. And what we've witnessed over these years is that everybody wants to have their own kind of clientele, constituent assembly to create their organization. This is why the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was created. I'm so glad, Roland, you mentioned Ella Jo Baker and talked about her and Barbara Ransby's book, because remember that SCLC, NAACP, and others wanted those young people to join their youth divisions. And it was Ella Jo Baker that said, no, this must be driven by your initiative, and I will not lead you. That's why they called her Fundi.
She actually busted
Bob Moses, any of them, they'll tell you, we loved Ella Baker because Ella Baker said this movement must be driven by you in coalition with everyone else, and I'm not going to lead you either.
Well, in fact,
coalition is the only way we make progress.
As Ransby report, there was a meeting at the President's House of Shaw University with Wyatt T. Walker and Dr. King to actually do that because the SCLC gave $500 to put the conference on. And she busted into the meeting uninvited and said, no, y'all ain't doing what y'all planning. Y'all need to read that book. To that point, before I bring on my next guest, at 8 p.m. tonight, after we go off, folks, we're then going to restart a Zoom with the National Cares Mentoring Project. Susan Taylor, go to my iPad, please. And so this is called, let me increase it here, exactly what we're talking about. Strategies for justice, wise words, and taking action. I'll be moderating. Tamika Mallory, David Johns, Ryan Haygood. It'll be an opening prayer by Dr. Bernice King. The whole point is for us to begin to talk about strategies. We have anger, we have righteous indignation, but now we must take that and then attach strategy to it, which is bringing me to my next guest. That is, what will Congress be doing? Joining me right now is Congressman Al Green of Texas. Congressman, you're there from Houston. George Floyd, of course, is from our native Houston, went to the same high school I did, Jack Case High School. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries is putting together a massive police accountability bill. Joe Biden mentioned that in his speech the other day. That's the role of Congress when it comes to coming up with legislation to deal with a police accountability. Give us a sense of what you want to see get done on the federal level in that particular bill or other bills.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank your guests and you for the history lesson. It was nice to take a walk down memory lane. I'm 72 years old, and much of what you have spoken of, I have lived and witnessed. And I'm going to answer your question, but give me one privilege, please.
Go right ahead.
We all remember that conversation, black men, that you have with your parents about how you're to behave in the presence of white women. I remember the conversation quite vividly. My mother made it very clear to me, conspicuously so, that you should never be alone with a white woman. And I think now we have video that we need to add to the conversation so that little black boys will understand not only what their mothers say, but what they can see on the video that happened in Central Park with Mr. Christian Cooper. That video is something every parent ought to save and present to children. As a matter of fact, I don't think you can see it too much. I think it ought to be played and replayed because Miss Cooper knew exactly what to say and how to say it so as to cause the person who was on the other end of that phone to react in a very hostile way if he arrived on the scene. I thank God that Mr. Cooper, Christian Cooper, is still alive. because it could easily have ended in another way. So thank you for having me on. Now, to answer your question, I think that we cannot continue to silo these issues such that we deal with one issue and then another and another. It is obvious that it is systemic and it's institutionalized. And I think we have to take a more lofty approach to it. Yes, we have to concern ourselves with the policing. We also have to concern ourselves with housing, education, environment. The list goes on and on because it is so pervasive, this racism that we have to contend with. I am proposing a bill that would incorporate what I saw in the spirit of Lyndon Johnson that you mentioned. He called for a war on poverty, and we spent trillions on that war. And anybody who says it was a total failure, I would take issue with, because we did get out of that war Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, expanded Social Security. We need to declare a war on racism and invidious discrimination. We need a cabinet-level department. Just as we have the Department of Labor, we should have a department that deals with the reconciliation that's never taken place. In this country, we survived slavery, but we didn't reconcile. We survived segregation, but we didn't reconcile. I'm calling for a cabinet that will be available to us, a cabinet secretary, a secretary of reconciliation, and whose job it will be to develop a strategy and implement the strategy. And this would not be antithetical to any of the other things that are taking place. I think all of these other things can complement what we're trying to do legislatively. But to implement this strategy and to come to Congress on a semi-annual basis and give us the progress being made on implementing the strategy to eliminate racism and invidious discrimination. I don't want to manage it. I don't want to curtail it. I want to fight to end it. I think this bill would do so. I'm working on the bill. I have a resolution currently that calls for this bill. It's been signed by several members of Congress. But as you know, dear brother, I am a liberated Democrat. I speak truth to power and about power. I see myself in the vein of Shirley Chisholm, the woman who said unbought and unbossed. So a liberated Democrat has an uphill fight when it comes to this kind of legislation. But I plan to take that fight to the hill because I think it's a fight worth fighting. We need a cabinet secretary.
But you also need the people to be mobilized and organized to put pressure on the members of Congress if you talk about a police accountability bill. Again, you can have folks out in the streets today, but if you have nobody knocking on doors in the halls of Congress tomorrow, then you lose the advantage.
I do not differ with you one scintilla. Absolutely. The people always make a difference. This is why I'm on your program, to call to the attention of the people some of the needs that we have. I believe in police accountability. I think we can accomplish that in many ways if we can pass the legislation.
Yep.
So I'm pushing for legislation, but the legislation has to be pushed by people. I do not deny it. So I'm appealing to people, all of the various interest groups. Let's get behind a notion of having a cabinet level position.
Got it.
Cabinet position. Right there, when the president sits at the table, we have somebody at the table. Listen, this is not a panacea, but it does put us in the White House all the time. And I would say to you, we ought to fight and lobby to make sure that we get someone who has an understanding of what you have been saying here tonight in that position as that secretary. This is where the people will come in. They will demand, hopefully, in ways that will be very moving and forceful, that we have a cabinet secretary that can relate to the things that you have been talking about. It's not going to be a charismatic leader. It's going to be a very understanding, a very intellectually prowessed person who can comprehend what needs to be done and then build the strategy around getting it implemented. Not going to be easy, but at least we'll be moving in the right direction. In the history of this country, we've never had a reconciliation committee. Other countries have had them, but we have not. So this is a step in that direction.
Congressman Al Green, we surely appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, good brother.
All right, folks. In a moment, we're going to talk about what's taking place. Remember, yesterday we talked to Randall Woodfin, who is the mayor of Birmingham. They took down that massive Confederate statue in Lynn Park. Now, you got a lot of white folks who are really upset, not happy at all with that. Well, today, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam announced that Richmond's Robert E. Lee statue is going to be removed and put in storage as soon as possible. Now, you see the photo right there of that particular statue. Now, you remember when they had the previous marches, folks they march around and they rally around these particular statues. Well, today, at a news conference, Northam made it perfectly clear it's got to go.
Message that this sends to people coming from around the world to visit the capital city of one of the largest states in our country, or to young children. What do you say when a 6-year-old African-American little girl looks you in the eye and says, "What does this big statue mean? Why is it here?" When a young child looks up and sees something that big and prominent, she knows that it must be important. And when it's the biggest thing around, it sends a clear message. This is what we value the most. But that's just not true anymore. You see, in Virginia, we no longer preach a false version of history, one that pretends the Civil War was about state rights and not the evils of slavery. No one believes that any longer. And in 2020, we can no longer honor a system that was based on the buying and selling of enslaved people, not in 2020. So I want us all to tell that little girl the truth. Yes, that statue has been there for a long time, but it was wrong then, and it is wrong now. So we're taking it down.
Folks, and we're seeing this all across the country. In a moment, we'll be talking with Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Justin Fairfax. Greg, what's interesting about this is that you're seeing this connection now. You're seeing where folks are connecting police brutality, whiteness in those spaces. You're seeing what's happening in terms of these Confederate statues. I keep telling people, this thing is different. People are going, no. We can't sit here and play games anymore. Y'all got to take white supremacy down. And the reason they target the symbols, which is also why we talk about this Drew Brees conversation. To his point, Mr. Blackface, I ain't forgot. Let's be real clear.
Hello.
The symbols matter because America loves to rally around its symbols.
White America does. I guess Black America does too. I'll never forget when they put Arthur Ashe on Monument Avenue from the torso up or his legs up. And he didn't even get a full statue. But Robert E. Lee is the statue that's on public land. That's why Ralph Northam can do that, because the Virginia law enables him to have the sole authority to move it. It was also erected in 1890, the only one in the 19th century. However, let's not forget that it was the United Daughters of the Confederacy who moved in a panic because the flood overwashed their little headquarters last week in Richmond, who also then moved to subsidize the Stonewall Jackson Monument that's on Monument Avenue, the Robert E. Lee, not just the Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate States of America. And the second monument after Robert E. Lee was the Jeb Stuart Monument. These are domestic terrorists. These are traitors to the America that Ben Crump apparently thinks is the beacon of light to the world. I'd like to give that brother a couple of books and then perhaps walk him through them. But if you've got those statues in an American city, you have embraced traitors to the United States of America. So I'm glad they're starting with Robert E. Lee, but Jeb Stuart, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson got to come down. And if taking Frank Rizzo down in Philly, and I love that last night with Brother Wolfen, taking down that monument in Birmingham is any indication, it's not happening because of politicians. I'm glad Justin is coming on so we can have a conversation with the Lieutenant Governor. But make no mistake about it, Brother Fairfax is in a position to be able to exert pressure to do that because everybody's in the street now, and they are using these monuments to try to build a temporary levee to stop this flood that's going to overwash them, called the general strike against this existing social order.
Yes.
Your point has been to point out along, it's the streets that are making these people do this.
Let's go right to the Governor, Justin Fairfax of Virginia. So, Lieutenant Governor, glad to have you back in Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thanks so much, Brother Roland. Always great to be with you and your wonderful panel.
This decision by the governor, how did he come to this conclusion?
You know, as the governor announced today, and I was with him down in Richmond, really on a historic day for Virginia and for the nation, that it's now time for us to move into the next 400 years of Virginia history and of American history, that we have to finally tell the truth about who we are as a Commonwealth and as a country, that we have to tell the truth about slavery and oppression and Jim Crow and massive resistance and all of those evolving systems that have kept African Americans in particular in a state and a condition that is represented by the Lee statue and so many other statues, the denial of rights, the denial of economic opportunity. And what I said is that today, taking the Lee statue down and any other statues, Confederate statues that will come down, was really just a down payment on a much larger amount of work that we have to do to unravel and defeat the systems of oppression that have oppressed Black and brown people here in this nation for now 400 years, beginning in Virginia. So we have living monuments to the Confederacy and to slavery and to segregation. Those living monuments are the schools that are substandard in Black communities where kids are going and not being given the opportunity to get a high quality education, where the buildings are falling down. They are our healthcare system, which is broken and have negative health outcomes disproportionately for Black and brown people. It's our broken criminal justice system. And you know that we did a justice summit recently and have some solutions, legislative and others, coming out of that, where Black people are overrepresented in our prison system by 3 and 3.5 times when you look at juveniles and adults. So those are the living monuments to the Confederacy and to the history of oppression that then hand down that oppression from generation to generation to generation. So these monuments need to go. The symbols are important, but so are the living monuments that make the oppression real every single day. And I'm committed to making sure we do that work in Virginia. 2020 is the first year of the next 400 years in America. And so we can write a new chapter and a new narrative. And I was out there with the protesters, making sure that their voices were heard, that they stayed safe. They were fired upon, as you may have seen, with tear gas, and I thought that was horrific, by the Richmond Police Department, and the mayor of Richmond and the Richmond PD apologized. But I went down the next night because I thought that should never happen. And so I stood in the middle and I said, if you're going to fire tear gas at them, you better fire at me first. And so they didn't do it, and I marched with them that night, and now we have change.
The thing that stands out that I'm seeing, the Frank Rizzo statue removed in Philadelphia, the two Confederate statues in Birmingham, what's happening there in Virginia. First of all, what is the timeline? When is it going to be removed?
I will be removed pretty soon. There's not a date certain set, but
a week, 2 weeks, a month?
Look, I don't want to put a date on it when there's not a date certain, but here's what I will say. I think in the relatively near future, the governor issued the order today, has already had the agency designing plans right now to take down the statue. The bronze portion, which is the large horse at the top, if you've seen this massive statue of Robert E. Lee, will be taken down first and put in a warehouse. And then there are going to be discussions about what to do with the pedestal, with the base of it, whether or not to demolish it altogether, to repurpose it for something that represents something different about who we are in Virginia. But it will be done, in a swift fashion. And again, I think you're going to start to see that happening all around the Commonwealth of Virginia. But this was on state-owned property within Richmond city limits, and so the governor made that bold decision, which I support. And today we announced what I think is going to set off a lot of activity around the country about telling the truth about what our history is, but also a different narrative about who we are going to be going forward.
Final question here, and that is, statues is one thing, but also policy is another. When it comes to what you see people calling for use of force, do you have any plans to introduce anything to change Virginia State Police? when it comes to use of force, dealing with some of these issues folks are talking about, these local police departments with Bill of Rights, things along those lines. How is Virginia going to reform its police departments?
Yes, we absolutely have to make sure that we're implementing policies, legislation, and substantive policy changes to deal with these issues around police brutality in Virginia and around the country. So, re-examining the use of force policies for each of our various law enforcement agencies, and you'll recall we have the state police, we have our Capitol Police, we have jurisdictions all around Commonwealth, counties, and cities and towns that have their own police forces. So they all should be reviewing their own use of force policies. We also need civilian review boards statewide so that when force that is excessive is alleged, that the citizenry can actually participate in that process and also hold officers accountable. What we saw in Minneapolis with the former officer now who murdered George Floyd in cold blood, he had reportedly up to 17 complaints prior to this deadly, horrific incident. So, there needs to be accountability from the citizenry. We also need to implement things like body cameras for all of our law enforcement agencies. We need to have certification and training that is standard so that every law enforcement officer meets a certain level of training that they've done. And we need to be able to track officers who engage in excessive force so that they can't simply do that in one city or one town, get fired or disciplined and move over to the next city or next town and begin to do the exact same thing when they're hired on a different force. So there are some really concrete and specific proposals that we need to begin to implement here. We'll be back in our session legislatively in January of next year. And there will be, I know, a lot of legislation put forward and voted on to change the laws here with regard to policing. But as you, Roland, have pointed out so many times, this is such a critical issue. It's been brought to the fore by all the recent activity that we've seen, but this is a broad conversation around racism. This is one manifestation of it, because Ahmaud Arbery was murdered by people who were not police officers. Obviously, one used to be in law enforcement, but he was murdered by vigilantes and lynched on the street in Georgia, hunted down like prey. Breonna Taylor, obviously, as a result of the police killing her while she's sleeping, an EMT in her house. Tamir Rice, so many, the issues go on and on and on. Not to mention in a park in New York City, where someone made a false allegation against man Christian Cooper, and had that not been filmed, we could have been talking about another hashtag and a life taken by something that should never have happened. So this all goes to the heart of racism, which again, 400 years ago, first enslaved Africans were brought here to the Commonwealth of Virginia, forced to land in Hampton Point Comfort, and we have been living with the legacy of that slavery in one form or another for 400 years. So 2020, again, is the first year of the next 400 years. And we've got to write a different story, a different chapter in American history. And I think what we've done today is a significant start to that, but it's only a down payment. Policies and laws need to change. They will change here in Virginia and hopefully around the nation.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax of Virginia, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you.
Folks, last weekend, to Greg's point, some 20,000 people, new cases of COVID-19 in this country. Now we've been seeing hundreds of thousands of protesters across the country out there, not social distancing, packed in very close quarters, raising new concerns about the spread of coronavirus. In a moment, we're going to talk to Kimberly Butler-Willis, actually two health experts about this particular issue. To Greg, Reese, and Erica, I'll be honest with you. I've been torn the last couple of days because, look, in a normal world, I'll be headed to Houston on Sunday to cover the marches as well as the events for George Floyd. We went to the same high school. It's in Houston. The church that his funeral is going to be at, my parents were members of that particular church. I know the pastor and his wife is very well. But I'm sitting there going, that means getting on a plane. That means getting a rental car. That means being around lots of different people. And to Greg's point, when I saw that funeral today, man, I saw folk not wearing masks, not wearing gloves, hugging, kissing, sitting next to each other. And I'm sitting there going, and so, I text a number of people, fellow journalists and others, And I had some other folks who were like, hey, Ro, you the only host of your show. You can't get sick. We need you exactly where you are. And this thing is just real in terms of this. And we know for 33 black preachers and bishops have died. Funerals have been incubators for coronavirus.
Roland, I thought about us last weekend, man. Your nephew Solomon, my nephew Ellington. These two brothers known each other since they were little boys. I held that boy in my hands as a baby. Both them boys came out of Walnut Ridge High School last weekend, and neither one of us was there. That's heartbroken.
Yep.
That's heartbreaking. And that's a moment of celebration. To not be able to mourn. You got the last interview with our dear brother, Conrad Worrell. I'll be normally getting ready to go to Chicago for the ritual, but we won't be able to do it. Roland, I'm telling you, man, these young people, they've been they're not social distancing. They were masked up, but when in front of 16th and H this afternoon about 2 o'clock, when they met up, the two big streams before they did the die-in, the two young brothers who were in the front and the sisters who were beside them in the front embraced when they converged, and I winced. They're strong. I'm 55 years old. I'm at a distance with my mask and gloves on, but I understand that this could have profound implications for not only them, but everybody who lives in their household. And it's multiracial. It was every social and economic class. It was every race. And then they're going somewhere to sleep. They're going home. Roland, we are in uncharted territory, man. And getting together in a church, I know this was important, but maybe they should have had it outside instead of the University of Central Minnesota. Maybe it should have been somewhere other than that church. There's not a logic for this at this point that I can see.
And Greg, you just mentioned that. Go ahead and take my iPad, please. And so you mentioned your nephew and my nephew both graduated last week. And so that's the photo of the both of them. So we want to go ahead and give them a shout out there. Let's go to Kimberly Butler Willis. She's director of the Ryan White. Okay, they're getting her sound together. Y'all let me know when she's there and Dr. Underwood are both there. Reese, look, this is real. And I mean, look, I appreciate what I'm seeing with the protests out there, but and look, people are putting their lives on the line out there protesting, being in close contact. That's real, but we also have to think about that. And same thing, look, I get, Reverend Sharpton, them talking about a march in Washington on August 28th. I don't know about putting a bunch of black folks on buses and planes and coming for a march in Washington. That's just, we got to be real about this.
We do. I was watching the memorial, and I just had this irrational, just hope that maybe, enough people have on masks, or maybe it's not as bad as what this data unequivocally tells us is bad, because people really have this cathartic need to release and to be together and to protest, and it's completely rational for that need and for them to express that need in the way that we see. But it's also terrifying to see the great dangers that people are putting themselves in. And to Dr. Greg's point, Carr's point, we're in uncharted territory. We have a pandemic and massive uprisings. And in a week from now, we will see what the situation is. But I mean, I can't help but go back and forth between this just irrational hope that maybe it just won't be as bad. And so I'm glad you have these experts on the panel tonight. But I'm torn like you all are, because I would love to be out there. I was out there protesting the Brett Kavanaugh. That was the last real big march that we had out here in DC area. And but this pandemic just really makes me take pause and be torn.
Erica.
Yeah, and thinking about all of this, I'm just reminded I've been working from home for about 14 weeks, and early on lost the first of one of my dear friends, Femi Anderson, from COVID-19, and lost her in late March, and her wanted to immediately go to her funeral because that's a dear sister and was a dear friend of mine, but was constrained. I had to push past emotion and watched her funeral live stream the day after my birthday on April the 4th. And so I understand really people wanting to get out and to make their voices heard and to make their voices known. And it really is a real thing for the Black community that even though that we are in, as Dr. Carr said, uncharted territories, that there are always these life and death decisions that our community is forced to make, sometimes on a daily basis. And so I get it, I understand it. I think that kind of moving forward, that's one thing that really needs to be taken into conversation, like with the experts that you're going to have on today, because Dr. Carr mentioned this as well, talking about the Reverend Dr. William Barber and the whole Poor People's Campaign that they've been planning for well a year in advance, that they are holding virtually. And so hopefully that there will be people that have expertise that are able to get to the folks that are organizing this march that Reverend Sharpton announced, to just do it in a different way, because Congress, at least the House side, is not in session. They're not there now. And so those are things that really just have to be considered and galvanized in the heart of the people.
I want to pull up right now Kimberly Butler Willis. She's the director, the Ryan White Wellness Center, and managing director of Good Stock Consulting. Glad to have you on the show. Also joining us right now is Dr. Janice Underwood, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Dr. Underwood, I'll start with you. We saw 20,000 new cases last week of COVID-19, marches taking place. We saw the funeral today for George Floyd. I didn't see social distancing being practiced, not everybody wearing masks as well. That is of concern, that to have hundreds of thousands of people protesting could very well lead to a dramatic spike in COVID-19 in cities across the country. Do you share the same concern?
I not only share the same concern, Roland, I know that we are in a pandemic that is disproportionately killing Black, brown, and Native lives at alarming rates. The issue, though, however, is that there has been a public health crisis that have been killing Black, brown, and Native lives for the last 400 years. And so I think what people are saying is that we realize that we're in a pandemic, but so many people are fed up and tired of a knee on their neck, and they want their voices heard. And so I'm excited about the work we're doing in Virginia to address both public health crises.
Dr. Willis, are you there?
I'm here. I'm struggling with my tech, but I am here.
All right, as we can work with you on that one, and that very simple. You're an expert there in public health. Again, what must be done for us to properly deal with this issue? Because, yeah, we are being disproportionately impacted, and I totally get folks wanting to be out there. And like I made the point before y'all came on, look, I'm from Houston. I will be covering the George Floyd funeral. I'm choosing not to go, scared to death, because again, you're going to be having people. I'm from there. Folks going to be hugging. You're not going. Again, not necessarily spread out. I mean, that's an issue, and we've seen churches be incubators for COVID-19.
Absolutely. Roland, it's funny that you say that. I had my best friend. She lost someone in her family. So we went to comfort her, and we found out that the preacher who led that graveside burial was indeed positive for COVID. So how do you navigate, right? As human beings, we know that the sense of touch and community, especially in the Black community, is essential. And especially during these traumatic experiences that we're all going through. So I say proceed with caution. We all have good sense, and we know exactly when we should be in crowds, when we should not be in crowds. I think we've been giving good directives about keeping it between 10 and below, and quarantining, as they're calling it. So only congregating with people that have been practicing the same healthy choices that you have been making as well. So using good common sense that I know we all have, but also being very cautious, because we're seeing those rates increase. And it's not because of the protesting, but because of these relaxed re-entry laws that we've since implemented starting Memorial Day.
Questions from each one of my panelists. I'll first start with Reese Colbert. Reese, what's your question for Dr. Underwood and Dr. Willis?
Thank you, ladies, doctors, for joining the panel. My question is, how do we break through in terms of people at least understanding how to wear a mask properly? I saw so many people today at the memorial service who had their mask, below their nose, under, basically falling off their face. How do we break through to people the importance of really making sure that if you are going to be out and you do have a mask, that you need to wear the mask properly the entire time that you are vulnerable or susceptible to any kind of transmission.
Is this it? Is this it? Where it covers your nose and it goes down to your chin? Is that it?
Yes, that is it.
Very
And this is the
good.
best. This is a favorite conversation for our medical director, Dr. Ebony Hilton. She is persistent and relentless about wearing PPE as it should be worn. And you want to make sure that you're covering the nose and the mouth, because remember, COVID is transmitted by respiratory droplets. It's an aerosol disease. So you want to make sure that you're keeping all of those airways closed so that you're being as safe and cautious as possible. And Dr. Underwood, I'll toss to you for any other advice you would offer.
Yeah, I think that it's important, though, that we understand that this is new for all of us. Just like this is a novel coronavirus, it is also very important that we understand that these are new ideas of wearing a mask in public. There are even laws on the books that suggest in Virginia that we're not allowed to wear masks to cover our face. And so as we socialize into reopening, we have to use these measures to protect lives and livelihoods. So one of the things that the Health Equity Task Force of the Virginia Unified Command is trying to think about is, how do we create campaigns that socialize the public into wearing masks? Because we know that there are so many people, specifically African-American men, who don't feel comfortable walking into stores with a mask for fear that they will be viewed as a threat by, folks like Amy Cooper or others or law enforcement. And so on one hand, you want to wear the mask to save your life, but on the other hand, you're worried that perhaps having a mask on may be detrimental to your life. So how do we socialize our communities and our neighbors and those that we go into stores, grocery stores with and doctor's offices? How do we socialize each other to wearing the mask and how to wear them correctly, like you said, Roland? Because these are what's going to flatten the curve. And this is what's going to help us as we think about until we get a treatment for this, right? We have no treatment. So this is all we have: social distancing and wearing a mask and washing your hands.
And making sure that you're not touching that mask with your face. So again, the PPE is there to protect those membranes, because we know that that's where the disease wants to go. So once you have that mask on, conditioning yourself not to touch your face, because again, you do not want to pass that virus on from your hands. So washing your hands as much as possible and making sure to cover those airways. Essential.
I want to go to Greg here. I will say this here. I was watching it again. I was watching the memorial service, and there was a woman who was at the pulpit. She was talking, and she wiped her nose, touched her nose, and then placed her hand back on the podium. I was like, yeah, I know somebody's going to be touching that podium. I mean, again, it's just things you now think about. Greg, your question.
And then I touched my head. Well, I done washed my hands 15 times. But, first of all, thank you, Dr. Underwood, Dr. Willis. I have a question as it relates to advice you might have for the folks who are out there protesting. I saw a lot of people with masks, a lot of people with gloves, but then I saw a lot of support stuff being handed around. Water, fruit, all kind of people. I mean, is there a protocol? And I know we're in uncharted territory, but what would you say to folks who are going to go out and demonstrate? And in your case, that anyway, I'm thinking about the police we got. I see all these police with no masks on. Is there a word for them, not just as law enforcement, but as human beings, because they themselves are susceptible? Not that I'm just saying, is there a protocol that everybody should be following at these protests?
Absolutely. And I say the best way to get that message across is for you to model that. So for you to make sure that you are interceding when you see someone not wearing their mask correctly, or when you see someone that is unmasked, because the worst thing that could happen is that from this protest and this uprising, which I think is essential for us causing a revolutionary and radical change in this country, is for us to then die because of it, especially from a disease that we can prevent. And so if we do want to go out there and we want to assist our protesters, because there's a lane for everyone, and we need these people causing a radical stir in our country, we want to make sure that we're supporting them and giving them the education that they need. And so if you go out, make sure that you model, take extra masks, make sure that they have exactly what they need, take the water, but take educational information as well so that they have all of the information they need to stay safe as we change this country.
Erica?
Yeah, appreciate both of you ladies. One of the things that I've also kind of been reading around is people actually covering their eyes, and that when they go into supermarkets, not to necessarily have gloves on. Could you both please educate us on, do we actually also need to be protecting our eyes as well when we walk outside of our homes and engage the public? And should we or should we not be wearing gloves?
Well,
So
go
ahead, Dr. Underwood. I'll volley that to you.
Wearing gloves is kind of like a double-edged sword, because you can wear gloves and get the virus on the gloves and then touch your face, and then you've still got the virus. So the gloves are really a deterrent to keep you from touching your face. We know that we touch our face hundreds of times during the day. And so the gloves sometimes can give you a false sense of security, but not to say that you can't wear gloves as long as you understand that you still shouldn't touch your face with those gloves. The other thing about covering your eyes is, I think it just really underscores the idea of really limiting how much you go outside. We have to have our eyes with regard to driving and navigating the landscape. And so if you think that it is not necessary for you to go out to a grocery store or go out to a particular event, then don't go, and limit how much you go out, because you are putting yourself at risk every time you go out. You cannot cover your eyes. And I'd just like to also underscore that sometimes, and there are people with disabilities or different abilities that have a hard time even with the mask on. So some masks are see-through, so that people that are reading lips can actually see someone else's lips so that they can understand what you're saying. So there are lots of different accommodations that can be made and that are being made, but I wouldn't recommend anyone covering their eyes. What I would recommend is limiting how much you go out and put yourself and your family at risk.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, look, we certainly appreciate both of you for the advice. Dr. Underwood, Dr. Willis, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having us.
All right, folks, going to go to a quick break. We're going to come back. Ooh, cops going acting a fool in North Carolina, destroying a medical tent for protesters. Also, Drew Brees not having a good week. Other athletes giving him hell, and he drops an apology. Crazy ass white people. Lord, we've got so many contestants, we can't even pick one. We'll break it down. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Back in a moment. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. All right, folks, we support black-owned companies. The folks at Seek.com, Sister Mary Spiel, she created, of course, these headphones as well as this virtual reality headset right here. Phenomenal. The headset, of course, 360-degree 4D. It's unbelievable sound. In addition to the VR headset, you see right here, if you, of course, just pop it open, slide your phone right into it. You can look at the content on Seek.com as well as other 360-degree videos. It's really, really great. All of this created by this sister, black-owned, folks. Go to Seek.com, Seek.com. Put in this code right here, RMVIP2020, RMVIP2020, and you can actually get that. And so, of course, using that code, part of the proceeds go back to our show. This is what we do. Black businesses, helping black businesses, all been able to grow and thrive together. And so we certainly appreciate partnering with them. All right, folks, we've been talking about all the craziness with the cops. Check this out. A video has been released that shows police destroying medical station at an Asheville, North Carolina protest. Watch this.
The police are now stabbing water bottles with knives and pouring all the water out onto the ground. You're destroying the water. This is the Asheville Police Department. The curfew is in effect. Please leave the area peacefully. Thank you. It's not peaceful. It's not peaceful, you f***ing asshole. It's
All right, folks, let the video roll. Pull my mic up. Basically, look, the mayor of Asheville, North Carolina, wants some answers as to why the cops did this. Erica, this is stupid. This is just stupid. I mean, it doesn't show. You're just trying to get back at protesters. Why would you waste like this? We actually saw this by some other departments as well.
Absolutely. We saw this happen in the District of Columbia. And my question is, on whose authority did they destroy the estimates of about $700 of supplies? And in even thinking about Asheville, North Carolina, Asheville is 80+% white. The population of Black and other people of color is, when you add them all up, is about maybe 18% when you add Black and other folks as well. And so what we're seeing are people who are non-Black that are really getting a small glimpse of what Black folks that lead, that are grassroots organizers get in terms of engagement with the police department. So that the mayor, who again has oversight over the police department, needs to follow up with the community to talk about what actionable measures have taken place since the time that the police, and these are taxpayer-funded public services, since those people felt that they were able to do what they were able to do.
It's just stupid. Reese, it's stupid. It's water. Like, what? Look, okay, fine, your curfew, they're going to take it back. You don't just look at this curfew. Is that, it's food, it's snacks. It's just stupid.
What it is, it's looting. Okay, they always want to talk about, make Black people the face of looting or make Black people the face of violence and these protests that are happening. It's the cops that are looters. Okay, there's absolutely no justifiable reason whatsoever. These water bottles do not pose a public safety threat to these cops who are basically just acting like animals, all right? And so it's sickening to see this over and over again. What they're trying to do is they're trying to create as unsafe conditions as possible, going after a medic, so that they can't service people who, like, for instance, Justin Howell down in and I can't recall the state exactly off the top of my head because there's so many of these cases, who was hit by a rubber bullet and is in critical condition now. And the cops hit the person who was trying to attend to them, the paramedic, with a rubber bullet as well. And so this is just more of them really flexing their brutality.
That's all.
And why people need to be in the streets in the first place.
Greg, this is why people don't like police. You don't have to do this. I mean, again, if you're cops trying to enforce a curfew, there's a way to be reasonable in talking to citizens.
Sure, but they may have had to do it, Roland. Not thinking about the uniform they wear or the police function they assume, but the human beings underneath the uniforms. David Zack, the police chief, said, "I apologize for not being able to constrain these, to confiscate rather, these supplies last night." And I think that was probably more true than he could admit. The reason they weren't able to constrain to contain these supplies, to confiscate these supplies rather, is because these are tiny pieces of men. They're searching for their manhood underneath those crushed water bottles, and they're stabbing the ground with their proxy phalluses. The idea is that they are somehow searching for some sense of their humanity. They stomped on those bottles because they are pieces of men. They stabbed those bottles because they're searching for some phallic dominance in a society where they joined the police force for this exact thing. So when the police chief, who should be fired but won't be fired, apologizes for not being able to confiscate, what he's basically saying is, I can't contain this urge because these are the people we have recruited to this fascist outfit called the police.
All right, folks, let's go to this story. Boy, huge story. Man, did New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees step into it. Yesterday, we showed you the video. We're going to play it again today, where Drew Brees did an interview with Yahoo Finance. And for some reason, he decided in the midst of all of this to talk about the U.S. flag. Y'all got the video?
Everyone is looking back now at Kaepernick's protests from a few years ago, and obviously they were always about police brutality. And now it's coming back to the fore, and a lot of people expect that we will see players kneeling again if and when the NFL season starts. I'm curious how you think the NFL will and should respond to that. And of course, you're such a leader in the league. What is your responsibility as a leader in times like this for the rest of your teammates and players in the league?
Well, I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. Let me just tell you what I see or what I feel when the national anthem is played and when I look at the flag of the United States. I envision my two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II, one in the Army and one in the Marine Corps, both risking their lives to protect our country and to try to make our country and this world a better place. So every time I stand with my hand over my heart, looking at that flag and singing the national anthem, that's what I think about. And in many cases, it brings me to tears, thinking about all that has been sacrificed, not just those in the military, but for that matter, those throughout the civil rights movements of the 60s, and everyone and all that has been endured by so many people up until this point. And is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart is it shows unity. It shows that we are all in this together. We can all do better, and that we are all part of the solution.
Well, it was fever in the Funk House. NFL athletes, including some of his teammates, not happy at all. Ed Reed, Hall of Famer, safety, had this to say, looking like Frederick Douglass while he did it.
I'm going to just get straight to it. I see Drew Brees trying to do his part in keeping black folk down. You're a straight sucker for that shit, Drew Brees. We all got kids, so I'm going to try to mind what I say right now. Drew Brees, you're a straight sucker, man. You're a sucker for that, bro. Why you think all these young people out here protesting? Why you think they out here protesting? The looting, I can see you speaking on the looting and saying that's bad, you don't support that. But why you think all these young people out here protesting? I really ain't got no more words for you, bro. You're a sucker, man. Straight BS, man. Straight BS. And for all my Saints fans, for all my New Orleans people who still like your ass just because they want to win games, y'all right with them. You understand? Drew Brees, you're a sucker. You're going to be a sucker. You understand? Punk, man.
Steven Jackson, very close friend of George Floyd, said this.
Shout out Michael Thomas, man. Way to hold Drew Brees accountable, Mike. I don't give a damn if he throw you all them touchdowns. Hold his ass accountable. Wrong, bad timing, Drew Brees. Bad timing, bro. All right? You play for New Orleans and you live in New Orleans. All them black people in New Orleans that support you, Drew Brees, you got to be a little bit more sensitive to the timing, bro. You can't just be saying shit out your ass. Yeah, you should understand. But y'all got to hold all y'all white teammates accountable, bro. Fuck all that shit. You know what I'm saying? We got to end that shit now. Ain't no straddling the fence, all right? Y'all got to check y'all teammates. Michael Thomas, I salute you, bro. Fuck Drew Brees. Way to check his ass. If you ain't down with us, then, hey, you on the other side. All that friend shit and acting like you support us, acting like you really down with us, we ain't buying that shit. All that half-ass supporting us, we ain't down with that. The same motherfucker you half-ass supporting is the same motherfucker you throwing them passes to that make you get all these goddamn yards. Facts. But y'all don't like the truth.
Malcolm Jenkins, who is a Saints player, was very emotional. Watch this.
Yeah, I promise you this, the onslaught of shit that we have to deal with is fucking crazy right now. Drew Brees, if you don't understand how hurtful, how insensitive your comments are, you are part of the problem. To think that because your grandfathers served in this country and you have a great respect for the flag, that everybody else should have the same ideals and thoughts that you do is ridiculous. And it shows that you don't know history. Because when our grandfathers fought for this country and served, and they came back, they didn't come back to a hero's welcome. They came back and got attacked for wearing their uniforms. They came back to people, to racism, to complete violence. And then here we are in 2020 with the whole country on fire. Everybody witnessing a black man dying being murdered at the hands of the police with his just in cold blood for everybody to see. The whole country's on fire. And the first thing that you do is criticize one's peaceful protest. That was years ago when we were trying to signal a sign for help and signal for our allies and our white brothers and sisters, the people we consider to be friends, to get involved. It was ignored. And here we are now with the world on fire, and you still continue to first criticize how we peacefully protest because it doesn't fit in what you do and your beliefs, without ever acknowledging that the fact that the man was murdered at the hands of police in front of us all, and that it has been continuing for centuries, that the same brothers that you break the huddle down with before every single game, the same guys that you bleed with and go on to battle with every single day, go home to communities that have been decimated. Drew, unfortunately, you're somebody who doesn't understand their privilege. You don't understand the potential that you have to actually be an advocate for the people that you call brothers. You don't understand the history and why people like me, people with my skin color, whose grandfather fought for this country, who served, and I still protested against that, not against the national anthem, but against what was happening in America and what the fabric of this country is for, or stands for. If you don't understand that other people experience something totally different than you, then when you talk about being the brotherhood and all this other bullshit, it's just lip service, or it's only on the field. Because when we step off of this field and I take my helmet off and I'm a black man walking around America and I'm telling you I'm dealing with these things, I'm telling you my communities are dealing with these things, and your response to me is, don't talk about that here. This is not the place. Drew, where is the place, Drew? I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. Because while the world tells you that you're not worthy, that your life doesn't matter, the last place you want to hear from are the guys that you go to war with and that you consider to be allies and to be your friends. Even though we're teammates, I can't let this slide.
A number of New Orleans Saints unfollowed Drew Brees on social media. Sid Ceballos, former NBA player, he released this video on Instagram.
My name is Cedric Ceballos. You may not know me,
Lanny,
but we crossed paths before. I know who you are. Let me introduce you to Gregory Lloyd Edwards.
Trying to figure out. It can't hear you certain places. All right. Is LG here? I don't know. Not till around 10 o'clock. All right. You got one straight on? Yeah.
Wow, powerful, powerful video there that Sid Ceballos put out there. Reese, Drew Brees released this. I posted last night. I said, boy, his PR team doing overtime. So here's what he posted this morning. First of all, he was indignant yesterday, but things changed this morning. I would like to apologize to my friends, teammates, the city of New Orleans, the black community, NFL community, and anyone I hurt with my comments yesterday is speaking with some of you. It breaks my heart to know the pain I have caused. In an attempt to talk about respect, unity, and solidarity centered around the American flag and the national anthem, I made comments that were insensitive and completely missed the mark on the issues we are facing right now as a country. They lacked awareness and any type of compassion or empathy. Instead, those words have become divisive and hurtful and have misled people into believing that that somehow I'm an enemy. This could not be further from the truth, and it is not an accurate reflection of my heart or my character. This is where I stand. I stand with the black community in the fight against systemic racial injustice and police brutality and support the creation of real policy change that will make a difference. I condemn the years of oppression that have taken place throughout our black communities and still exist today. I acknowledge that we as Americans, including myself, have not done enough to fight for that equality or to truly understand the struggles and plight of the black community. I recognize that I am a part of the solution and can be a leader for the black community in this moment. I will never know what it's like to be a black man or raise black children in America, but I will work every day to put myself in those shoes and fight for what is right. I've always been an ally, never an enemy. I am sick about the way my comments were perceived yesterday, but I take a full responsibility and accountability. I recognize that I should do less talking and more listening. And when the black community is talking about their pain, we all need to listen. For that, I am very sorry, and I ask your forgiveness. Reese.
Listen, I'm going to echo the very wise words of Steven Jackson. Fuck Drew Brees. Fuck him and all these fake-ass allies that sit up there and put these black squares, that put these PR release statements out there, and their actions say the exact opposite of what they are trying to telegraph to people. This shit is not a game to black people. People that are out there putting their lives on the line, risking coronavirus and all the other things, and risking more death and more brutality from the cops. This shit is not fun. It's not an Instagram game. It is real life or death for us. You are not an ally, Drew Brees, and anybody like you, anybody that agrees with you and your dumbass racist mentality. I am so sick of being patronized. I don't want to hear from Drew Brees. You're not a leader. You need to just sit the hell down and shut the fuck up. How about that? All of y'all out there that think that you're going to use this moment to show your allyship, even though your PDFs and your statements and all that other stuff does not align with how you have conducted yourself throughout your entire life, shut the F up. Sit down and shut up. You can listen to black people without making a goddamn announcement that you're listening to black people. You can be an ally, some of y'all that might be capable of doing that, without performing for people. Just do the work. Just shut up and listen. My blood is boiling. And to have that image of a black, what the hell was that? It's insulting, and they're not helping. Now is not the time for kumbaya. Now is the time to pick a side. Are you on the side of white supremacy, or are you on the side of black humanity and Black Lives Matter? There is no kumbaya with that. You're one or the other, period.
Well, Greg, now you got to follow that.
Listen, I'm happy for all that smoke to be trained at Drew Brees. Reese just laid it out. And my man Ed Reed channeled his inner Erica Savage Wilson on that. I haven't watched a game in the NFL since they, wouldn't sign caps. I ain't seen a game in the NFL in a couple of years. But if the Ravens were playing the Saints and Ed Reed was out of retirement, I might just sneak up and watch that game, because that brother looked like he want to strap it up right there and handle this on the field. With that in mind, I agree with Shannon Sharp. Drew Brees should retire. He was thinking about retiring at the beginning of this past year. He's 41 years old. He signed another 2-year, $50 million deal. That was him worried about his money. Let's be very clear. Appreciate the offer to be a leader for black men. I guess that's in the Pat Riley model. I don't know, leader of black men on the field. But these brothers have made it be known. And how ironic is it, Roland? You talking about this story today, when on June the 4th, 1967, Muhammad Ali said, I'm not going to Vietnam. And Jim Brown called him to Cleveland and sat there with Willie Davis and Bill Russell, the great Celtic champion, Bobby Mitchell, who played for the Washington Club, and a senior who was a 3-time college player of the year out of Power Memorial High School in New York, the great Lou Alcindor, who would soon change his name to Muhammad Ali. And after they heard Ali, change his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And when they heard Ali say, I'm not going to Vietnam, those brothers, accompanied by the black mayor of Cleveland, said, we stand with this brother. Drew Brees, you're beneath contempt, old man. Retire. I'm with Shannon Sharp, because in the light of what those brothers did that day, you don't even rank. Go on in the Hall of Fame, go on into Canton with the rest of your little Klansmen, and enjoy your life. But you have just now cratered any idea that you won't go in without a big white asterisk by your name.
Mm-hmm.
Erica Savage?
Oh, I echo the sentiments of Reese and Dr. Carr, and I'll say this as well. It's B with a capital B. No, your apology is absolutely rejected with that copy and paste bullshit that you presented. And for anybody who wants to kind of read why I have not read, know why I have not followed the NFL in over a decade, pick up William C. Rhoden's $40 Million Slaves. You know, for him to even invoke when he was responding on this interview to talk about, to weave in that he would never, what he would never do, and then to talk about World War II. You know, we have plenty of black veterans in all of our families. Me, I'm also a veteran as well. And I'm thinking about black veterans that came home to, as one of the brothers said, to being attacked, but also to being lynched. And then I'm thinking about the black veterans that came home and they were absolutely taken out of the GI Bill, that they weren't able to come home and enjoy some of the benefits that their white veteran colleagues were, white veteran brothers and sisters were able to enjoy. So Drew Brees showed his ass. He was caught in that. No, he is not welcome on any front, particularly in the black community with a capital B, to be any kind of leadership. And what Dr. Carr talked about around him retiring, it's been time for him to do that.
Can I say one more thing, Roland?
Sure.
I just thought about something else.
Sure.
I just wanted to say, to echo Dr. Carr's point about being beneath contempt, Malcolm Jenkins, what you crying for? On Instagram, why are you letting these white folks see you crying shit over what Drew Brees is talking about? Because he's a white supremacist. Because he does not value your black life. Don't let him see you sweat like that. You ain't got no reason to be up in there crying about that. You need to be angry. You should be angry. And I sympathize with your pain and your trauma from that. But it should not come to a shock as this man who's sitting up there, like you said, is your brother on the field and nothing else, has contempt for your black life and your black family's life. Cut the tears. And you need to show a little bit more restraint and make this man respect you, because clearly he does not.
Well, now, I don't need to say nothing. But the bottom line is this here. Shannon Sharp broke it down today. Martellus Bennett, if y'all have not seen Martellus Bennett's timeline on Twitter, go see it. He laid it out. He was real swamped today. We're going to get him on the show next week. But, man, he spoke a series of truth. But it's amazing when these white boys want to tell us about their grandfathers who fought. And they want to ignore the fact that we had grandfathers and uncles and great-grandfathers who fought. Yet when they came back, were not treated like heroes. They were treated like they were the enemy. We had grandfathers and great-grandfathers who fought the Germans, who fought the folks over there in Italy, who fought the fascists, who fought the Nazis. Yet there were Nazi POWs who were put in cars ahead of black troops. When there were race riots in depots, train depots all across the country when they got back from fighting. Oh, yes, white soldiers were not happy at all to see black men wearing their uniforms. Black soldiers, Drew Brees, were lynched in their uniform. There were members, black folks, who were veterans, folks like Medgar Evers, who were gunned down by white supremacists. Yeah, black people fought for this country, too. And see, Drew, when you want to make this whole point about how patriotic your grandfathers were, ain't nothing more patriotic than fighting for a country that don't love you. Ain't nothing more patriotic than fighting for a country that looks at you as a second or a third class citizen. A country that put Nazi POWs ahead of you. So next time one of y'all white boys want to give us a lesson, a trifling lesson on patriotism, why don't your ass go read Jackie Robinson's book, I Never Had It Made. The same Jackie Robinson who they tried to court-martial in El Paso, Texas, because he stood up to white supremacy. Yeah, TNT years ago did a movie on it starring Andre Braugher. The same Jackie Robinson, member, veteran, military, who wrote in his book he would never say the Pledge of Allegiance or stand for the flag or sing the national anthem because he knew exactly what white folks thought about him, who titled his book, Drew, I Never Had It Made, because he said, that's the case. If there's one black person who's not free, then I never had it made. You're going to think twice next time before you sit here and stand there and praise that flag waving and oh, what it mean, and I will never. Really? Bet your ass never going to make that mistake again. I bet you're going to think twice when you go to that White House again taking pictures with Donald and Melania. Yeah, it's going to be a real interesting locker room in New Orleans. And trust me, ain't going to be no second line taking place. Well, it might be a second line because it might be the second line for the funeral of your career. I'm just saying. All right, folks, I want to give a shout out to folks who have supported our show, joining our Bring the Funk fan club. I got so many crazy ass white people cases. I ain't even got time to get to them. We're going to deal with those tomorrow because in 5 minutes I got to do this Zoom with the National Cares Mentoring Project. So let me read some of the names of the people, of course, who supported us with our Bring the Funk fan club. So I got through the A, B's, and C's yesterday. Let me get down to the D's. All right, let me get to this teleprompter to get down to it. All right, let's see if I can get with it. Dale, Damon Hawkins, Darnell Simon, Darrell, David L. Frank Sr., Deborah Frazier, Deidre Franklin, Dolores, Dimitri Dunbar, Demetrius Frazier, Demetrius Williams, Dina Bowen, Dina O, Dion Francis, Derek Hunt, Deshandra Edwards, Deshandra Jackson, Diane Singleton, Dolly Mathis, Dwight Red, Etna Wingfield, Effie Coley, Elizabeth Garman, Elliot Clark, Erica Savage Wilson, Erica Freeman Prothal, Eva Wilburn, Farida Miller, Farron, Frederick Carroll, Garcia, Gail West, Gentry Pitts, Gerald Davis, Gerald Ramsey, somebody said gift card, Gil Ing, Giselle, Grace, Gregory Fields, Gregory Gibson, Gwendolyn Carter, Hod Smith, Herlon Pasco, Hollis Hopkins, Honey Ohana Tanae, Horace Woods, Jacqueline Young, James Green, James Robinson, also Jamie Worthy, Jane Sakuro, Janet Harris, Janice Alston, Janice Washington, Jermon Holmes, Solutions, Jarvis Waters, Jeanette Russell, Janine Frazier, Jeffrey Scribner, Jennifer Ellis Jackson, Jerry Henderson, Jerry Thomas, Jesse Peterson, Jessica Foreman, Jessica Henderson, Jessica Owen, Jill Hendricks, Joan Warren, Jody Robinson, Joe Curtis Grubbs Jr., John Hodge, John Moore 64, John Williams, Jones, Joshua Henry, Joyce Moore, Judah Smith, Jivette Dobson, Kamala Bell, Carlin Frazier, Carolyn, Kathy Dean, Kay Strickland, Keith Antoine, Kittner Jones, Current Pitts, Kimberly Creasy, Kimberly Marshall, Kimberly Vaughn, Krista Hines, Katina Hayes, L.R. Cambridge, Larita Cormier, Larry Johnson, LaShawn Joshua, LaShandria Allen, Lauren Smith, Lavonda Fletcher, Lavonda Gardner, Lanice Shahid, Leon Fervin, Leonard Long, Leslie Funn, Lisa Ward, Lloyd Wills, Lorraine Coleman, Lutalia Stewart, M.K. Alexander, Manuela Pascal, Mark Porras, Marsha Baltimore, Marcia Cloud, Marie Shambeck, Marjorie, Marla Singleton, Mary Brownridge, Maurice Coleman, Maurice Perry, Megan Simmons, Melvin Clemens, Melvin Murphy, Me, Myself, and I, love that one, Mia G, Michael Beckman, Michael Gibbons, Michael Gregory, Michael Hickman, Michaela Mosley, Michelle Layler, Michelle Stevenson, Majano Alexander, Mona Louise, Montre Jones, Natalie Odom Poe, Natasha Varner, Nari Berry, Omar White, Pamela Brody, Patricia Bryant, Paula Davis, Pierce Johnson, Poetic Praisers, QV 1023, R. Byam, Renee Good, Renee Green, Rhonda Buckingham, Roberta Morgan, Robin Williams, Rochelle Rod, Roger Pearson, Rodney Rambo, Roger V. Trice, Ronald E. Fields Sr., Ronald Harrison, Rondell Taylor, Rona Williams, Sammy Walthor, Sam Simeon, EMS Inc., Sarita Lathan, Sandra Powell, Selena Maduforo, Sharon Stroman, Shauna Yeldale, Sean Burns, Shay Thomas, Sheila Shonda Simmons Perry, Shireen Raul, Karate Do and Fitness Academies, S.J. Hastings Counseling and Consulting, Stanley Boss, Stephanie Freeman, Stephanie Giamfi Darkwa, Steve Richards, Stephen Houghton, Sybil Lee, Sylvia Moore, Tanika Yarbrough, Tanya Alexander, Tasha Johnson, Tashana Freeman, Tashika McAllister, Tawanda, Teddy, Tanisha Waldo, Teresa Babers, Teresa Clemens, Terrence, Prince, Terry Gordon, Terry Mailer, Tessera Lawson. That's my commercial. The Circle of Excellence Network. Tony Younger, Tony Canada, Tony Foster, Tasha Corprew, Tracy Jarmon, Tracy McFarling, Trent Robbins, Trina Hodges, Tonya Griffin, Tawana Carter, Valeda Gorey, Valerie King, Victoria Langston, Vincent Willis, Willie Rouse Jr., Wyckoff, Yvonne Dawson, and Zarek Clinton. I got everybody. No, I didn't. That was some people who sent in checks. Let me give a shout out real quick. Hold up. Houston Alvin James, Davey Irvin, Kelly Smith, Jimmy Waters, Kimberly France, Austin Williams, Maxine Pascal, Kay Tucker. I'm all caught up. Erica, Greg, and Reese. Woo! I want to thank everybody for joining our Bring the Funk fan club. Thank you so very much. Your dollars go to support this show, make it possible for us to do what we do, to cover the stories that we cover. So here's my plan for the George Floyd funeral. So I'm not going to physically go, but here's the piece. I've talked to some Texas Southern University students or professors there. They're going to have some of their people going to be at the rally. So we have the technology. I just want y'all to understand why your dollars matter. So we have a particular unit, costs us about $15,000, which allows for us when we live stream our live view unit. They have a new thing called an LU Smart. It's $245 a month. It's an app. So what happens is we send somebody a link to their Android or iPhone. They're able to download the app. They can connect to our signal. And so what we're going to try on Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday is to find somebody who's going to be at the Floyd event in North Carolina and Monday and Tuesday for us to be able to live stream those events. That's what your dollars go to support. So not only are supporting the show, but we're paying those HBCU students for the work that they do. Tell me what other network or black show is doing that. I thought so. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. If you want to support us via Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. PayPal, paypal.me/RMartinUnfiltered. Venmo is venmo.com/RM Unfiltered or at RM Unfiltered. You can also send us a cashier's check, money order to New Vision Media, Inc., 1625 K Street Northwest, Suite 400, Washington, D.C., 20006. Again, folks, we want to be independent. We want to be free, clear, to be unapologetically black. I'll see you guys tomorrow.